All right, let's start out, if you don't mind, introduce yourself. No, we're not starting. We're going to start on the end.
Start right there.
No, you're new. You're kind of scared. I know you don't like talking in front of people, so we're going to make you go first.
It's my first time.
I can tell. But I'd like to know, introduce yourself, but then also how you got started in the industry, if you can. That'd be kind of handy.
Okay, probably as many of you guys know, I guess I'm Delmar Wagler, Davis County, Indiana. That's where we was born, bred, and raised. Roots grow pretty deep there. We had horses ever since I was knee-high to grasshopper. As far as what I guess my part I play in the industry, we do quite a few pedigrees in the auctions across the country, all the way from Iowa to Pennsylvania and Gordyville and whatever. And it's actually a very fun thing. Probably what I would cherish the most is the relationships. I mean, it's not a get-rich-quick industry, but I guess personally I would cherish the relationships that we've gained the last probably 5-10 years. You see those people every time at every auction, and they got a grin for you, and you kind of try to return that. But as far as how I got started in the industry, back when I was about 7 years old, we made a pony account. And it was a no-lose business venture. Dad bought the feed. We had the pony mare. The stud was run up the road. We took the mare to the stud and we raised colts, and the boys broke the colts and we sold them. The boys kept all the money. And it worked. We liked it. But that's probably where we got the connection with horses. Dad liked them, Grandpa liked them, whatever, but I can still personally remember, my older brother, I was the second boy, and I can personally remember the first pony that I broke. And it was a Morgan Cross pony, and I got pretty attached to her, and those of you that are horsemen can relate to that. And I can still see, after I took that pony through the ring, I think we topped the sale that day for $700. And I can almost still cry today. When I went back to that stall, the last time, all the other family members already on the way out to the buggy, I hugged that pony's neck and I cried. So, I guess that's how I got started.
That's great. Richard?
I'm Richard Yoder from Mattoon, Illinois, and we own Shady Lawn Stable, and we run a training barn. And I also work a lot of auctions, just like Delmar does. We actually work some of the same auctions. Like you said, it's very enjoyable. It gets to be a job after you do it for years, and you run week after week. But it's a job that I love, and you get to see. One thing that I like is you get to see a lot of good horses, and you see horsemanship. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we do. And also, I guess the way I got started, I grew up with horses. We primarily had draft horses. We raised our own buggy horses. My dad, he's 82 years old, and he just sold out his horses just a couple weeks ago. So he's been raising horses all these years, and we never had the most expensive ones, but so I didn't get to play with high dollar horses, but I had a lot of fun. We got our babies ready as weanlings to sell them and so forth, and when I was about 15 or 16, my dad let me fit some horses for a guy that had the Kelowna draft horse sale, and he told me, I'll never forget it, he told me that if he doesn't care if he makes any money, he just wants me to enjoy what I'm doing. So I got to thank him for getting me started. So I guess that's how I got started.
Eli Bontrager from over here in a little community in Lewisburg, Kentucky. Construction is what we do for a living, and the horses is kind of a hobby. We have a few brood mares and play with a few stallions, and I guess where I kind of got started in horses was in my early years of marriage. I lived in central Illinois, and we always had a few horses growing up, some ponies, but I lived up there and I shoeing a few horses and got started with the T-tricks on the track there, shoeing some race horses, and mostly young horses getting started, and pretty good opportunity. This was in 2004 or 2005, back when we could buy good trot mares for $1,200–1,500 and make $500 and was making big money. And so, anyway. But that was kind of a secondary job. Started out as a secondary job shoeing horses and instruction during the day, and went into full-time shoeing, and the horses was pretty convenient to get a hold of there. Standardbred industry, it's the first of that. I was born and raised in Tennessee and didn't have a lot of standardbreds down there. And yeah, it just kind of started from there, and today we're still doing it not to make a living, but because we love it, and it's a hobby, it's a family thing. Wife, kids, everybody likes it. We got some riding horses and go trail riding a little bit. It's just kind of something that's for everybody, for the family. And it's kind of where I got started.
That's cool. Eli, I did have a follow-up question, because I know you love talking in front of a whole bunch of people. I can tell. Yeah, Eli is not the kind of guy that, I talked to him a little bit ahead of time, and he is not the big kind of braggy guy that you might expect. So you said you do horses, kind of a little hobby there for you. How's that little hobby been working for you? You did all right so far?
Well, if you ask my wife, we lose on everyone.
I just want to make it clear, so I've heard of a real fancy, really big, fancy, schmancy stallion called My Massive Muscle. I don't know, have you ever heard of that horse? Maybe you encountered that horse anywhere along the way, the really fancy, super expensive stallion?
He does a bigger one now.
I hear that. You might have encountered him anywhere along your hobby?
Glick's Equine, it's all there for that. He had him down here and stood that stallion for a year or two there, and so he gets all there for that.
I'm sorry, now who owned that stallion before he became real famous? Who found him? And, I gotta tell you, this hobby is...
How do you act when you become famous?
I think the word you're looking for is Oscar famous. That's what I heard. That's what people call me. I think it means famous, I'm pretty sure, so... No, and one thing you guys are, I'm so glad, because you didn't come from the, you see some of these big fancy English guys that came from a lot of money. They, their grandparents had, $1 million race horses and all that stuff. You guys are just the same as everybody else, at least when you started, and you've worked really hard to get where you are. And I think if we can remember that when you're answering some of the questions today, make the answer not only for the big fancy people who are really thinking on a big level, but also I think one of the first questions I want to ask you guys is, how do you decide if you even want to sell a horse at a sale? Now I get that if you have too many horses in the barn, you kind of have to, but what's going to make the first decision about, maybe I'm going to take this horse to a sale? Because I don't know how many of you out here have never sold a horse, but it seems like it can be kind of scary to do it when you don't know, well, how do I even get the forms, and what do I do, how do I know where I'm supposed to put them in the stall? But how to decide when a horse should be sold? So we're not talking about what level of horse, anything like that, but just the average person saying, yeah, I guess instead of selling it privately, I'm going to take the horse to a sale. And I'm going to start with Richard on this one.
This wasn't on the sheet.
No, I think that's why I started with you.
Yeah.
You could talk about,
So you're talking just you've got a 4-year-old horse out here in the barn, and
or a foal, doesn't matter. Let me make it easy. How do you decide whether to sell privately or decide to take it to a sale?
okay, so whether to sell privately or go to an auction, I guess my answer to that would be, if you have connections and you think you can sell it privately and get a good price for it, I would say that would be a good option. If you don't, and you have the ability, or have somebody that has the ability to fit that horse or baby and take it to a good auction somewhere, and you think you have a better shot at getting more money, or you want to experience going to an auction and selling a horse, that would be probably the place to do it. So most of our Amish community don't go to horse shows, and so the horse sales are a kind of the function to go to when you want to go to a horse event. So it's something that the whole family can go to and experience. So maybe that's not really a good answer, but that's what I've got to say.
That's good. What do you think, Delmar?
I think you probably summed it up pretty good. I think as far as if you should go to an auction or if you should sell the horse private, I think that would probably be kind of like rolling the dice every once in a while. But I guess I owned a real estate company for quite a while, and we've actually sold it now, and I'm still the manager. But when you asked the question, it made me think of it. The other day, an old Dottie walked in the office, and he's kind of an old farmer. He's got, I don't know, he's probably got 1,000 acres or better, and up our way land selling pretty high. But we had just got done selling some of the highest ground I had sold to date here in our area for $35,000 an acre. And he came in and he said, I don't need an auctioneer. He said, I can sell it myself. And my secretary is not actually real quick on the tongue, but he nailed it. He said, what are you going to ask for? He said, $35,000. He said, where'd you get that number? So I guess what I'm saying, if you've got a horse that you like, chances are there's quite a few other people going, I know a lot of us get barn blind, whatever. But if you sure enough have an elite animal, I mean, you take some of these top stallions, and Richard's been involved with some of the best in the business, but you take some of these top stallions and you hang a price tag. You hang a price tag of $500,000 on him, they're going to laugh you out of town. I mean, they're going to think you're a complete idiot. But they go to the auction and they may bring $700,000-800,000, and people think that's what they was worth, and the seller's actually not considered an idiot. He's the hero. So I guess that's my answer to that. If you're willing to roll the dice and you sure enough have an animal that's going to be well received by the public, take a shot at it. There's a lot of upside.
Eli, I'm going to change things up for you to make this a little bit of an easier question. I'm going to paint a picture and tell me sort of your thoughts on whether you agree with what I'm saying or not. Let's say somebody out here ends up with a yearling that everybody is really excited about. It's got all the things going for it. It's got good breeding. It looks great, moves great, and people are getting really excited to where somebody might walk up and say, I think that yearling might be worth, $50,000. It might even turn into a super fancy schmancy stallion that's going to go for big money. That person may have the opportunity to sell it privately. Somebody comes and say, well, I'll give you $30,000 for that horse right now. This guy who does not have a lot of experience, he doesn't know, he was going to sell it to the neighbor for $3,000 the day before. Now he's probably not going to, but he's thinking, all right. At what point is it okay to let, especially for somebody who doesn't do this as a business or a hobby as you have, at what point is it okay to just sell a horse for $30,000 and not feel bad when it goes to a yearling sale and it goes for $100,000? At what do you say, no, I'm gonna, like Delmar said, roll the dice and just keep a hold of it? Or is it okay to just sell it for a really good profit, walk away and not feel bad? And in my mind, it feels like if that amount of money that you're going to sell that horse for is not life-changing, if it's not going to let you pay off the house or pay a big medical bill, is it worth just holding on because that may be the only time you have a horse like that and you just get to enjoy the ride when you go to that yearling sale? And even if it only goes for $25,000, you still got to have that enjoyment for that amount of time? Or is it worth it just to get rid of it and say, hey, I just made a good profit and that's fine? How do you feel about that? I know I kind of painted a big picture there.
Yeah, so, and I guess you can look at that in a few different ways. If like you said, if the horse is, if somebody's offering you money and it makes sense for me, I'm just saying, if it makes sense for me to sell and make a profit on it and be satisfied with what I get for it, it would make sense to sell it. On the other hand, if we sell a horse, it's that way with me. If I sell a horse at a sale or sell it private and the next guy goes and makes money on it, it actually makes me feel better. Rather than selling a horse, and for sure if you're selling it to somebody that, okay, he's going to prep it and take it to another auction, and you're selling the horse private and he goes and loses money, it's kind of a, what do you call it? It's kind of a brother. It don't feel good when you see somebody lose money. So for me, I would rather sell a horse. I'm not saying that I'm going to sell them for under the money, but I'm okay if the next guy goes and makes money with the horse. But as far as making the big bucks, I guess you have to look at it in your own program if it makes sense to sell a horse or if it don't. If you're happy with the price you got at it, then the next guy might change it a little too. So yeah, I don't really know. I guess in your budget. Mom might say we need to sell it, so.
Exactly. No, that's a great answer. Now, just to make you guys feel a little better, we'll go back to the actual questions that are on the list. Let's talk about how to get let's say a young horse ready to either sell privately, make it look its best, or to sell at a sale. We've got all kinds of things that you can do, but remember that when you answer the question, try to talk about to the people that, they just are going to sell it, they don't have a lot going on, they're not going to take it to a big fancy trainer, some might, all the way up to people who are going to, send it out for 6 months and get it trained up. So how do you approach that when you want to get that horse to the best condition you can get in? Let's say a yearling, just to start off with. What would you say to do? And we'll start off with Delmar on this one.
I guess as far as that goes, I would feel that starts from the ground up. If you look at a lot of our communities, you'll see that people, they let the coat on the mare, and in about 5 months or 6 months old, the mare's rib starts to show. And so I guess I would like to say, I think it starts with the mare. You keep that mama bear in good condition, that's going to pass right on down to the foal. I've got a standardbred colt there at home out of what I would consider a decent mare, but she's not in great condition. She's a little hard to keep. That foal will never be as good as the one I got right in the next stall over with a mare that's in really good condition, even though they're fed with the same program. But I think as soon as you get that done, you want to offer maybe a creek feed, get that colt eating as early as possible, and keep that colt fed all the way along. And I think another thing that we do too often, we wean that baby, and maybe over winter we throw it in a box stall and we let it there. I feel that exercise is a good part of keeping that yearling healthy, keeping that yearling sound to get to the yearling sale. You might want to a lot of people would turn them out nights and get them in days. I feel like that's a pretty good program. But good hay, good nutrition. As far as the nutrition, I mean, that's a conversation to go all day long. Too much of a good thing is not a good thing. This last winter, I had a whispering wind cactus yearling. I wasn't planning on saying that, but I had a whispering wind cactus yearling, and I had a pretty hot feed at that point, and I blowed his hocks out. So I think he'd have brought pretty good money through the sales. Dad rode a pretty good, wave all winter long, and I think we'd have got pretty good money out of that yearling. But with hocks blowed out, it's not going to happen. So too much of a good thing is not a good thing. I didn't do it in moderation. I was trying to get him pretty big, pretty fast, and I had too hot a feed. So there's a lot of different programs. I'm not going to get into that because we could talk all day on that. But get you a program that you can feed quite a bit of feed, and it doesn't affect your joints. And there's a lot of different conversation on that. But
Eli, can you add to that, especially on the nutrition side? How important is a feeding program? And how do you tailor it to individual horses, or don't you?
Yeah, I think too that's, like Delmar said, that's very important with, I'd say find a good program and stick with that as far as minerals and supplements for the foal. As far as, sometimes you'll get one that needs a little this or a little that, you can always add on. The exercising thing that he said is a big thing. I feel like that's a very big thing in foals, and we can't throw them out and wait till it gets closer to time for the sale and then get a pot belly, kind of a scrubby looking yearling in and hope to get it ready for the sale and have it in good shape. We got to keep them there. I guess that being said, as far as exercising, 5 or 6 years ago, I bought a farm, new farm, and had no buildings on it, and I had to build. It was in the winter months, and I threw the barn up and had a little lean-to there. We had 6 babies that year. They ended up running in and out of the side shed there, and they was in mud about knee deep. We had good Western hay and a good same feed program, and we had the best looking babies that year ever. Love it. They was in mud, and every time you come out, they was feeling good, they'd spook, they'd run out in this little mud lot, and like I said, they was knee deep in mud. I was kind of embarrassed when somebody would see it, but we had the best babies that year. They was just, I think from the exercising and the whole muscle tone, and the feed was going where it needed to be, and they wouldn't stand in the box though, like some of ours are today. So
I've got a sort of a follow-up question for that, and it's going to be hard, I think, for you guys to answer. It actually might be easier to ask somebody in the crowd, but I'm not going to, don't worry. The big advantage I see that you guys might have is that you've seen so many yearlings you can judge them a little bit better because you had 100. And you say, wow, that's a really good one, that's not so good. How does somebody who doesn't see very many horses judge whether their yearling is okay, good, or really good? How do they make that decision? Because if they don't know that they have something kind of special, they may end up selling it for too little, or doing the wrong things with it, or not sort of promoting it in a way that'll be the most advantage to them. How can someone who doesn't have that experience understand whether something is okay, really good, or super good? Is there any way to sort of decide that when you don't have the experience that you guys do? Or at least you could also say how you do it for yourselves too. And Eli, why don't you just go ahead and keep on going there, because you've got quite a few yearlings that have gone through.
Yeah, I don't know as far as that for myself, of course, looking at the conformation and the structure of the baby and all that, it's going to help a lot on that. But for somebody outside, I guess if somebody didn't really know, I like the idea of what Wilmer said earlier about us being open and talking about it, being able to ask questions. People like that can always ask somebody with experience like Daniel Glick here, or somebody that's dealt with foals, and kind of get an idea on that. As far as sometimes you got a good mare. I've had mares a foals out of the same mare, and sometimes you'll have a good mare and a good stallion, and the conformation and everything on the foal is just not near as good as its brother. So it comes with good straight legs. There again, it's very important to keep them trimmed up, keep all that. Good head and neck and ear. Yeah, it's just there again, back to the confirmation on that. But yeah, I don't really know. As far as picking something out, it comes with, I guess we just see them a lot of them, I guess.
It seems like part of what you have as a responsibility when you're thinking about selling something is listening to people who tell you that your yearling is not top tier. I mean, even though it's not what you want to hear, you don't want to, I assume you don't want to tell a guy, oh, no, he's real good, and the guy spends all kinds of money on something that's not worth it. So I would assume being honest, as much as it isn't always fun, is really important, because you don't want a guy to change his expectations. Richard, I have a feeling you may have seen that a few times where guys will come up and they're super excited about something, and you've seen more than they have. Do you make it a point to say, hey, I guess you don't want to say, that horse isn't very good, what are you talking about? I don't see that's the best way.
So in my business, if like we fit horses for sales, and so like your question, Wade, you're right, and it's not fun, but one way to answer that question, if you have a horse and you want to sell it and you want to take it to this special sale, and I don't think it's good enough, I'll probably tell you that. I might tell you that we can try it, but he's not going to be A+. Or we could go to this sale over here and he'll stand out there. That's one way to handle some of that. I feel like that responsibility comes on somebody that does fitting for sales and stuff. But with all that being said, I've been wrong a lot of times. So sometimes when you take some of those that don't look as good and you start working them, you can actually change it quite a bit. So there's no surefire way maybe to answer that, but I do feel that being honest up front is pretty important.
As far as the auction side goes, that actually was an interesting point. If I have a $10,000, we're just going to make up that number, a $10,000 horse, am I more likely to get that number or higher by taking that horse to a sale where he's going to be in the top 10% of that sale? Or am I going to be more likely to take it to a bigger sale where there are a lot more higher end horses, but people will bid that horse up because they're looking for, there won't be as many $10,000 horses there, and all of a sudden somebody who's already bought a $100,000 yearling will spend $15 on my $10,000 horse because that's not really a big deal to them. Where is a $10,000 horse, as an example, yearling, going to, or even a $10,000 buggy horse, where is that going to shine and get you the best chance to get what he's worth? Is it when he's in the top percentage of a smaller sale, or he's kind of in the lower mix of a bigger sale? And I'm thinking, Eli, you're not an auction guy as much, so we're going to leave you out of this one. That'd be a little tricky. But Delmar, what do you think on that?
I guess the question, if you want to be a big duck in a little pond, or just a duck of a, on a big pond, but I might use Eli's mare that he sold. Didn't really see that one coming, but me and Eli actually got in an argument, and I love arguing. I'd rather argue than eat. But he had a Gucci old mare that he had down here, and he had her he drove her for his personal horse for several years, and he took her up to the showcase, and I want to say she'd bring about, 37.5, is that right? Yeah, I think she'd bring about 37.5, and a year or so back in Gordyville, all the Gucci old mares was bringing that, 50 and 175 and whatever all they was bringing. And I told him, you had her in exactly right place. And he said, no, I didn't. He said, my boys said she brought more in Gordyville. But after Gordyville was all over, that's the one time I beat him. I haven't ever else, that's why I'm saying it in public. But I think having that mare in the right sale, your yearly, your whatever, and every sale is different. You can sometimes be at the same sale, and as the momentum goes back and forth, I've seen horses bring 1,000 and two different, and maybe the lesser horse was more. But as far as your question, I think positioning your horse in the correct sale is a big deal, and then also taking it. If you don't have a lot of connections, and I don't like when people say politics, it's not like that, because you can act, a lot of little guys can take some big high dollar horses. But if you sure enough got a good one, slap it in one of them training barns, Glick, Equine, Richard, Robert Miller, whoever all you've got, and get the most out of your buck.
Actually, that would be a real quick question. I don't want you to name specific prices, because that's not what we're trying to do here. But what is it, can you give me a range of what it's going to cost if you put a horse into one of these barns? Now, there's going to be a big range. It depends on the area. If you're in a competitive area, it's going to be higher prices. If you're in a smaller area, the prices are going to be lower. But it's not going to be, as I found out when I had my very first horse trained, it's not going to be $100 a month, as I thought, by the way.
But we'll let Richard answer, but before you do it, it's not what I'm paying, what am I getting? Because it may help my investment big time.
Exactly. And so I guess that should have been my point, is what are they going to be probably spending versus what, we don't know what they're going to get for a return, but what's their outlay?
So that's a loaded question. There's so many different ways to go there, but I would say on the average, if you got a really good one and you want to go to a special sale, we should have that horse for 3 months, and it's probably going to cost you between $4,000 and $6,000 when it's all said and done. That's maybe, it probably won't be below $4,000. You figure everything in. I think maybe that'll come in a little bit later in our roundtable discussion, but you have to, we're in the business to make money just same as everybody else, and we have to support our business, and by the time you have your monthly fitting or training bill, you have your shoeing, you're going to get some chiropractic work, because you have to treat these horses as athletes, and some of your best athletes, they have personal trainers, and they do a lot of little things. It's the small things is what makes all the difference in the end. So you start adding all that together, you're just going to get up to there. But like Delmar said, it's maybe not as much what he's spending as what he's looking to get. So it's not we can't guarantee you that we're going to sell that horse for $100,000, but I can guarantee you we're going to try.
That's really helpful. And I'm going to break a rule they taught us in law school, is you never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. But I do not know the answer to this question. Is it an option for someone who brings a horse to be trained? Is it an option, or is it something that happens all the time where that trainer sets it up so that they get a percentage of that horse's selling price? Is it an option, or do they always do it or never do it?
There's options. There's people that do that. We do that sometimes. We don't do it a lot because it comes back to the business standpoint of it. we have to pay our bills, and if that horse doesn't make money, we have to pay our bills. We're running a business, so it's not a hobby, or it's so that's why we don't do it quite as much. There's times when I'd be way better off if we would do it, and there's times when I'm not.
Eli, I want to switch up to you, to go to a little bit different question. We've talked about some of the horses that are really ready to be trained up, but for you, how do you make the decision to sell it as a foal, to sell it as a yearling, to sell it as a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old driving horse? As you're going through, what sort of process do you go through to sort of think, well, I'm going to wait a year? Because that's got to be a big decision.
Yeah, it is, and I guess that's probably, it's a tough question. There again, it kind of starts as a foal. If you got something that you come out of the mornings and it's born and it kind of means something to you there. I've had some that, they're there the first day with their eyes open, they're wide awake, they're just alert, they're just a thing, you kind of get that feeling from the get-go, then it just kind of, something drives you to keep that to the very end. That being said, I had one that was out of a good mare, and I sent it up as a yearling to my trainer in northern Indiana to put through a sale. And when he got it up there at the foal, and I've seen this foal growing up, and I thought it was a pretty good foal, a pretty good colt, but just after he got it up there, he called me and he said, we don't need to sell this colt. We need to take it back home and keep it. And he said, don't castrate it. So that's the next horseman's over mine. I mean, I knew we had a pretty good colt, and looking at the conformation and what the horse was, but I missed that one. So I guess it's just kind of how attached you are to him and what you see and where it makes the most sense. Sometimes I see a foal that can bring as much as a yearling as what it's ever going to bring. And then other times there's a foal that as a yearling he won't bring as much, but he might grow into something. So I guess there again, for me, it's just kind of something that you learn as you go, and you still mess up at that sometimes, if that's helpful.
Do you guys find that the genetics really holds true for offspring year after year, that you say, let's say you had one that you waited 3 years or 4 years to sell it, and at first it just didn't look like it had anything going on, and finally, bang, at the end it really was shining. Do you see that tends to happen to all the same offspring for that same, sire and dam? If you did that, do they tend to follow the same pattern? Is it fair to say?
In some pedigrees probably, and others no. I actually had that happen to me. There's 4 brothers out of the same sire and the same mare. The one's a star. This is the one that was sent home, and the other one was just kind of an average buggy horse. So, but I think in some cases you do. I was working on trying to buy a hard rock and roll mare that this guy's got that had a pretty good offspring, and he's telling me that she's had 4 offsprings, and every one of them's been that way. They're all stars. So yes, I think some genetics you can, but I don't think that holds true in everyone.
That's helpful. All right, let's switch it up here. I guess how important is it to try to get foals on the ground sooner, especially if we're talking about bringing horses to yearling sales, or even just selling them privately, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you've got a horse that's got 2-3 months extra on another one, they're going to look bigger, they're probably going to look a little more fit, and if they've got the right feeding program, they're probably going to be rounded out really nicely. I noticed at the very first yearling sale at Mount Hope, the horses that sold better were bigger. I don't know if that's always true, but is it worth it to make that effort? And I think, Richard, I actually did listen to you a little bit this morning. It seemed like some guys were trying to get horses in foal a lot sooner. How much of an advantage is that?
I'd say there's a definite advantage to that. Although if you are selling them as yearlings, I do think you can have a fairly late foal. If you have, and touching back to what Delmar said earlier about it starts when they're babies, I like to take that back. It starts when conception begins. The way that mare is fed throughout the term of that, she's carrying that foal when it's born. I truly think you can have a mare that has a foal the end of May, and that foal will stand right with the yearlings that were born in January the following year. If you have a good feeding program and you feed them well, and you do your homework. With that being said, it's probably a little easier with the one that was foaled in January, but I think what I've seen is we run all our babies together after they're weaned, and we feed them, and we feed them all same, and it's by the next summer you can't tell which one was born in January and which one was born in May. We don't do the yearlings as much as some of you guys do, but as far as selling them, but I don't think there's a lot of difference if you feed them really well and you push them and that way.
So would you say that kind of ties in with the previous question, where if you do have a really late foal, it might add something to your decision to sell them a year later than you normally would, just so they match up with everything else, as part of the decision process, not that you have to. Is that valid?
Yeah, I'd say it is. Yeah, it definitely is. You know, you're going to have to push them maybe just a bit harder, but yeah, so that would make a difference.
All right, we're going to switch it up to something a little more fun, I think, just a little bit. So you've decided to sell a horse at an auction, got the horse there, everything's ready, and horse comes into the ring, and right before that, you run up to the pedigree reader and you hand him your sheet of paper. I can imagine, just from what I've seen, that can be a car wreck sometimes. And so, let's make it positive. What advice do you have to people who are, especially if they're first time or they haven't done it very often, when you create that note that goes to the pedigree reader? Now here we're just going to talk about the note, not the rest of the stuff yet. What should be in there? How should it come to you? When should it come to you guys? Let me know.
Well, most of them, when they come up, they wait until the horse is already in the ring. At that point, it's all about momentum, okay? And if you've been to auctions, momentum can make you 1,000 or 2, and if you really study it, it will every time. But they come up, and the horse is already in, and I'm done started on the pedigree, and I'm running the thing, and just at that point, they go like this here. You know, they're very nervous. And I get nervous too. So it's not like it's an event that don't happen to everybody. It's happened to me. One time I was selling a pony, and one of the first ponies I sold, I couldn't hardly talk to the auctioneer because I was out of breath. But that's what happens. They come up behind me, and they was shaking already when they wrote the note. And I'm sitting there like this, and this thing's on 2 pages because this is sure enough a good one. And I'm sitting there and I'm trying to read it, and before it's all done, me and him both look like a dummy. Because I'm going in like this here, and every once in a while I'll say a word and it's just totally off the wall, you know. And then whenever I get all done, and the auctioneer's sitting here to my left, and he's just raring to go. And I finish on kind of a little bit of a high note, and he takes off. About that time, he starts tapping me on the shoulder, and he said, yeah, he's got a bump on his left hock, and he's got this, and he has that. Just killed that momentum that we had coming up. So I would say, write down what you want, make it in shorthand, and we do it for a living. It's what we do a lot of times. Let us put it, would you not say, Richard, I should let you talk on it. Let us put it into words. Let us recommend your horse. You put the good points on there, and let us put it into story form, maybe. And before I go, I want to say one more real quick deal on that. I had a guy come in, and a lot of times they don't think about how it sounds. So we have to actually be able to hear one thing and say another. I mean, there's times that people are human, so therefore they don't always do like you think. I mean, they'll say some pretty honest stuff in your ear, and you've got to kind of take it through a filter and try to get it over the mic. But I had a guy come up the other day at Davis County Auction, and he had this note. It said, the reason this horse is here, the other one died. He said, this is a half-brother thing. I said, but he's in good shape, ain't he? He said, yep. But, you know, it was irrelevant. I mean, but to him, it was his farm. He probably hadn't left the farm for a couple of years. And that was an important piece of the information. You know, the reason he didn't come, that dude died. And this was a half-brother to the one that died, which meant nothing to us. And the crowd just kind of, you could just see him out there rolling, you know. think about how it sounds maybe a little bit. I don't know, I probably went over my time.
No, you guys are great, and I just think your job is so hard because, like you said, you have to translate something that may not be as positive into positive without making it so positive that it's either not true or fake. I always think like somebody will walk up and say, yeah, he cribs a little bit. And you're like, okay, he cribs. He cribs a lot. He loves to crib. You got a tree you want to chop down, you hitch him to that tree, he'll cut it right down. He is guaranteed. He didn't crib, you bring him on back. That's probably not the direction you want to go. But you guys are so talented at looking for the positives. But you've got to make the opportunity for them to do that. And part of that is to write that recommendation. And it seems like it almost might make sense to leave. So write the recommendation and have somebody check it over. And leave a little space at the bottom for any last minute things like he got a bump, you know, he was down in the trailer or something like that. And prepare to add that right before, and then you've got the good stuff and a little bit of last minute stuff so you're not doing that interruption like Delmar was saying. Sorry, Rich, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there, so go ahead.
No, I disagree with what Delmar said. Stick to the basics, write down, call what needs to be called. As far as a lot of the good stuff about the horse, I think we could probably pick that out. I'm not saying we'll know everything, but believe me, when you're in there hour after hour reading pedigrees, we look for any good thing we can find to say about that horse. It may even be just a nice strip, but sometimes that's about all we can find. But, you know, that's, and another thing is second and third speeches. Most auctions, they move right along, and you know what? If we're not getting there, that second and third speech is actually probably going to slow it down more and make you bring less than if you just, you know, it's like we get paid to do our job, and yeah, that's it's just kind of, it's a little bit disturbing when people are just there talking into your ear and talking into your ear. And I've got a guy over here with his recommendation for the next horse, and I'm getting ready to sell that. I don't want to be disrespectful to Eli here that's selling his horse, but I need to get ready to sell Delmar's. And so at some point I'll just kind of turn away from him and act like I don't know he's there.
Eli, what would you say? Oh, sorry.
Real quick before I go, we was up in Topeka last week, and we made a little bit of a joke up on the auction block. Probably, we figured out probably, and Richard does probably more pedigrees than I do, and he's one of the best in the business, but we figured out one of the most lines that come up there is, it's off of a good mom. And we made a joke about it, and every time I'd say, you know, I'd say the auctioneer's name, and I'd say, would you believe? I said, it's from a good mama. And nobody else could tell it, but they'd go like that there, and he said, from a real good mom. And that's literally, it was kind of it was a joke on the block. And I guess, you know, we all the mares that we have, we lack. So I think a lot of us get barn blind, and we had whatever it was, a couple thousand, you know, 1,000 horses go through there. And a lot of them had a good mom.
Eli, when you're, I don't know how much time you spend actually writing up your note to the pedigree person, but if you could think of sort of a checklist of things to decide whether you want to talk about when you're writing up a little note for the auctioneers, what would be in that list? So Delmar just brought it up, like, you know, if the mare has some special quality, that could be important to say. You know, you've got, whether, if it's an older horse, does it have good barn manners? Is it kid friendly? Is it kid safe? What are some of the pieces that need to go into that, in your opinion, to make it a more positive recommendation without getting too braggy about your horse?
Well, I think we need to think about what the crowd's here for. You know, if people are here for a good buggy horse, looking for a good buggy horse, then if this is a good buggy horse, point that out. It'll be a good buggy horse. If it's a good lady's horse, point that out. If it's a good brood mare, point that out. You know, if we think so, that's important. Keep it short and straight to the point, I think, is important. Like Richard said, the second and third speeches, for me, I'm just talking out of being a buyer. Sometimes if somebody's up early, you're kind of interested in the horse, and you're kind of in the rhythm, and you're bidding, and the guy just keeps getting on the mic with another speech, it almost turns you off, and you're like, you know, he's bragging too much. And he can do that to the crowd. He can kind of dull, or he does to me. So I think make a speech about your horse, just like they said. These guys are professionals at it. They do it all the time. Let them do it. They sit on the block. If a horse is going too cheap, most times they're going to catch it, and they're going to add something to it. And a lot of times they'll see something on a horse that some people might not even point it out, a good point or whatever. But very important, if there's something going on for any reason, be straight up honest. If it's a cribbing or it's got a limp or it's not completely sound, just mention it, and so the buyers are aware of that. I think that's very important. And also, on the paper, have that to where the pedigree reader knows that up front, so he can put that in words.
That's really helpful. The one thing I never thought of is, it's true, you actually have to think about who's going to be buying that horse. Why are the people here? To me, I go to so many events, I don't always focus on, I see all my friends out in the crowd, I'm always giving them a hard time, waving to them. But that's really true. If you know why the buyers are there, you're going to be able to write that pedigree, to write that recommendation and tailor it to the audiences there. I always feel like at Mount Hope, they have a crossbred day, and a guy from Montana always brings these quarter horses in, and in his recommendation, he'll say, now this horse has been out on the trail, he's herded cattle for 2 years, and I'm thinking, this is Holmes County. Unless they can milk a cow, I don't care whether this horse can run sheep or not. So you got to know who you're really going to be talking to. I'm going to ask you a little harder question, but I want to try to stay positive about it as we can. Once in a while, you're going to have to make the decision whether you're going to no-sale a horse. And there are so many factors that go into that. Part of it is you feel guilty because you don't want to let the sale down, like, this isn't any good, I'm just going to keep it because I think I'm better than this sale. But at some point you may need to no-sale a horse. How do you make that decision, and when do you make that decision? It seems like in the ring would be a bad plan to decide that you want to no-sale a horse. I mean, as far as the number, not whether you're going to do it or not.
Yeah, I think that's true too. For me, you kind of go in there, you need to kind of know where you're at on the horse and what the horse needs to bring. And sometimes it's, we was talking earlier about they know what the horse is worth or praise the horse, but sometimes the horse is having an off day. You know that. The other people might not know that. So if you got in mind, this horse is worth $15,000 and he's having a little off day, he goes in there and he only wants to bring, 11 or 12. That's kind of a last minute decision. Sometimes you have to do that in the ring, just because he's having an off day. But for the most part, I think kind of go to the sale, I think, and so the horses are being appraised. And sometimes the horse works better in one sale than it does in another, and you don't realize that until you're there. But yeah, I don't really know. I'd say have a price in mind, and a lot of times, even when you get on the block, pedigree readers or even the auctioneer, they kind of like an idea of what you're thinking, and I think that's a good thing. Some people I've seen go up there, and they kind of want to keep this secretive. They don't want to know what you got in mind, but it gives them something to go off of. If he says, what are you thinking here? You say 10 grand. Well, he's going to try to get you more, but that's a good thing. Give him an idea what kind of caliber horse you got here or what you're looking for.
Richard, would you say that this is going to sound a little bit like a strange point, but in a weird way, you're kind of like a doctor, where whatever the person tells you up on that block is really kind of private between you and that person? Because if you would go up later and say, he thought that horse was worth $30,000, but it wasn't worth $30,000, that guy was crazy, that makes him less likely next time, if it gets back to him, less likely to tell you what his horse is worth, which makes your job a lot harder. But then again, I feel like you get guys who say, how much you kind of looking on this horse? And the guy will say, 150. And you're like, $150,000? Are you drunk? What is wrong with you? Where you can't say that. You run into guys who really have or too high of expectations.
Oh, you definitely do. There's no doubt about that. And I guess I always, as there's times when people come in and they think they've got the world by the tail, and to me it looks like a chef, but I'll try my best, and without fail I feel bad for them. For one, I feel sorry for them or bad for them that they don't get what they want, but it's, as a professional, it's our job to make it look as good as we can, and still stick with the truth and try to sell that horse for them. But I feel like, when we leave the block, we have to leave what's in there, we have to leave it there, and we don't go talk about it. So that's kind of my take on that.
Delmar, how do you deal with that when a guy comes up and he gives you a price? At some point, do you realize it's just never going to get there and you just got to back out early rather than
And I've seen a deal, you know, I like to know, and the auctioneer, and Richard can tell you this as well, he would kind of like for us to kind of pick that up before we go, and, you know, as we're going along and let him know if we're about there or not. And if he's thinking 25,000, and we're down there around 10,250 and 10,5, and then we might almost get 10,750, it's time to let the auctioneer know we're spinning our wheels. We're not there, we're not gonna get there, it is what it is. But what was your question again?
I forget, I don't actually listen.
Okay, it doesn't really matter.
No, but basically, it just seems like, how do you work with the person who's selling the horse? We were starting to talk about no selling the horse, but it seemed like.
And sometimes he just needs a little bit of guidance. You know, I've seen him come up there and tell me 10,000, and next thing you know, they're selling them for 6. And I've seen it the other way. You know, he tells you 6 and you get about $8,000 and he'll no sell the thing. And that can be pretty frustrating. We see a lot of emotions. And just the other day I told the auctioneer, I said, we're good. And we tried, and a little while later, and he had already brought quite a bit more than he said. Next thing you know, he no sold the thing. And it can make us look like dummies. You know, we say it's going to sell or whatever, and the next thing you know, it happens. And the other day we had a 12-year-old mare, and I forget exactly what she brought, but it was, and she wasn't quite sound. I think we got like $6,500, give or take a little bit. He was back there trying to no sell it. And then the auctioneer goes, well, he goes like this, he turns the mic on. And he obviously didn't say it on the mic. He said, do you want the mare or do you want a check? He said, I believe I'll take the check.
That's good.
One more thing though, and it happens, I'm sure it's happened to Delmar, but you have people that come up with a horse and you, like I personally don't see this horse as being very good, and they say they want 25,000 and that horse will bring 50. It's happened, maybe not that number, but we can't always pick them out.
Eli, when you're presenting a horse in the ring, I suppose I'm thinking more driving horses. Is there some advice you can give people? Let's say you guys are probably more likely to bring a horse, let's say Park County or some of the sales down here rather than the big ones. Are there things they want to make sure they do or don't do when they're presenting that horse in the ring that you've sort of learned from, that you're thinking, oh, we want to make sure we always do that? I'll give you an example. As a photographer, I always would like to ask if the people could do at least one reverse when they're in the ring, if the horse will do it, because I'll see a horse that has way more lift on one leg than the other, and I'd like to get the best picture possible, but if they always stay with the wrong leg toward me, it gets a little trickier to do that. But I'm sure you've got, more things, or what do you do also if you have a horse that isn't handling the best in the ring? Are there things you can do? So what's been your experience?
Yeah, so as far as presenting one in there, I think if you got a good buggy horse, present him, show him that he'll stop and stand, take off, listen to you, show him his trot. You definitely don't want to show, if you're wanting to sell one and not have a phone call, you definitely don't want to do something that's not going to be there tomorrow. I think that's very important. So if we do something to hype him up or do anything like that, and then they get him home tomorrow, it's not going to be there. I think let the horse be itself and try to present them on what they are, and there again focus on what the crowd's here for and what they're wanting to see. And I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Richard, what would you say you've seen people do that might be a little bit of a mistake that they want to avoid at any kind of let's say a driving sale would probably make it a little easier.
So try to correct problems in the ring. You should know your horse before you go into the ring, and if that horse isn't wanting to go to the left that day, don't go to the left. And if Wade tells you to go to the left, still don't go to the left. You're there to sell your horse for the most money possible, and like Eli said, don't try to misrepresent him. But if you're selling a buggy horse in an indoor ring, nobody's going to take him home and hook him to the buggy and drive around an arena. They're going to go out on the road. So if your horse doesn't want to trot to the left or to the right or whatever, then don't do it. And stay out of that horse's way. When you go into that ring, you always need to think what the crowd is seeing. It doesn't matter how that horse looks when you're sitting behind him. It doesn't matter what you see. You're there to present that horse, and you need to think what the people are seeing. So that's the biggest mistake I see that people make is their presentation when they go into the ring. They need to, the training is done, it is what it is, and you need to make the best out of that horse possible. And if he's got a problem with shaking his head, and if, you know, whatever, don't do it. Don't do anything that makes that happen.
Delmar, one thing I don't know the answer to, and I've seen it a bunch of times, is the thing, if
And you're a lawyer.
It's
got me nervous.
Yeah, that's because I dress so fancy, you can tell I love it. How do you decide when to?
Oh, when you wash that sweater.
Hey, look, I've got a lot of things like this. It looks like I'm always, actually it was so dirty one time I spilled pizza on it, and it got a little bit of, I thought, oh, I don't want to look bad at the sale. So I took it to the hotel room and I washed it real good to get that spot out so I looked real good. But the thing was so dirty, it actually made a clean spot. I went around the spot all day, but that's another story. When you go to how the horse.
But you do wash it though.
I saw I got a lot.
Have already?
Yeah, I just got a lot of them. I just keep pulling them out of the pile. Don't they just clean themselves when you just leave them on the floor? I don't know. When you want to add something like, we're going to throw in a free breeding to so-and-so, or we're going to, oh, by the way, this mare's in foal, and when do you want to add the bonus prizes to make it, to keep that momentum that you talked about earlier?
I think it changes for each horse. Very, very rarely do I like to make a third speech. I mean, it's just a couple of times in an auction. And there's times that you need to and you do, but I would prefer to have everything here, and if I want to save a little bit back, I'll do it. You know, other than, I mean, it happens all the time, especially in one speech auctions. Sometimes we have auctions and we try to stay with one speech. And I've kind of got a method that we use and seems to work pretty good, but I mean, he just won't shut up. I mean, just on and on. And I sit there and I grin and I shake my head, yeah, but I'm not on the mic. You know, so I'm kind of taking care of the problem, but I would prefer to have it on the sheet and let us play it where we make mistakes. I make mistakes every day, but we were sitting there for several hundred head that day. Well, that might have been one time for him.
That's a really good point. If you have more experience with that exact sale at that exact time, then maybe the buyer would consider. So if you have I've always wondered about this. You've got a horse that is really snappy. I mean, you can hot rod him, you can go, but he's like the nicest, calmest, most relaxed horse. If somebody else wants to drive him, he'll just be really nice going down the road. Is it smarter or better to start him off slow, like, oh, little buggy horse, nice doggy horse going through, okay, and then halfway through, then really get him going? Or start him off really hot and show him off, and then slow him down, stop him, and then have him do the little doggy walk? Which is going to be more persuasive to keep people on board for bidding? Because I always wonder if it's like a husband and wife, let's take you guys as an example, and you don't want a hot horse, and you're really excited about a hot horse. And so you see him come in hot, and you're like, oh, man, that looks good. And she's like, you're not buying that horse. No, you are not getting that one. Versus if he comes in too slow, and she says, well, I think that's kind of a nice one. He's like, that'll put me to sleep before we even get there. Which way is it probably better to keep both people happy when it's all over? Because we don't want him to not be on bidding.
My answer to that would be, and they might have a different answer, I would suppose probably everybody does. My theory would be to show that horse at his fullest potential. You need to, again, think about the amount of buyers that are sitting in the crowd and who's actually going to write out that check. And so are there more people there looking for that slow, relaxed horse, or do they want something that's really going to drive? I think most of us know the answer to that. So my theory of that would be, if you have the time to show them that horse slows down and does it real easy, fine. But when I hit that ring, I want that horse to look like a world champion. First impressions are like that sells it 100% of the time. So that's my answer to that.
Delmar, do you have anything to add on that one as far as?
Well, I guess it depends on how many of the women was boss. You know, if Mama had the final say, you might want to impress her. But I agree with Richard.
No, I've always said, If you guys, I don't think many of you have met my wife, but if I were Amish, they'd call me Lydia's Wade. That's just how it is. Just Lydia's Wade came over. Oh yeah, that's how.
You're married to Lydia?
I am married.
That's a nice name.
Absolutely. And she is the boss. And as long as you both know it, it all works out just fine. We're going to kind of move into the home stretch here a little bit. What I'm wondering is if you could give, I'd like to give a little advice to some of the young people that are out here. I think one of the most exciting things about coming out here is there's so many of the young people that are excited about horses. And I don't know, out here, you don't have as many of the pony sales like we do at home. And the pony sales for us are a great way to sort of bring people into feeling comfortable with selling horses. But we're not talking about giving advice to people who don't have, who just haven't sold a lot of horses, but specifically to the, 12, 13, 14-year-old folks that are here. What are some things that they can do to just get better at learning about horses and then maybe, bring it to sales? We're not specifically talking about sales. Eli, what would you say would be some things that they can do to just be better at being with the horses, whether it's for sales or not?
Well, first of all, love the horse. If you're a horse lover, or if you have it because your brother's got one, or because the other kids have it, or whatever the reason is, but if you love the horse and respect the horse for what it wants to be and what it can be, I think is a big thing. Yeah, I don't really know. I think experience is probably a big thing there too. If we play with them and mess with them, it's one of the things you can't have a horse out in the barn. It's just like we heard earlier. If you go out there once a day or once a week and mess with the horse a little bit versus going out there every day and spend a little time with it. When I was a little boy, I had a black pony, and it got rode every day. Not almost every day, but every day I was on that pony at some point in time. And I feel like that's where we kind of made our connection, for her to be what she was and for me to learn how to ride and all that. It didn't come from just hitting it once in a while. So be consistent, feeding, training, loving, and just be a horseman, I guess, every day.
Richard, what do you think?
I guess, I like what Eli said, the horsemanship part. Always keep your eyes open, never stop learning. And another thing that don't jump on every new piece of equipment or tack or device that comes out, because proper horsemanship will trump anything you can buy every day of the week. There's nothing wrong with these companies making new products that are coming out, and I think it's great. They can be tools, but I think more money should be spent for young guys to maybe go work with people that have been doing it for years. They should invest that money into doing that rather than going and buying a horse walker or a treadmill or whatever it is. And I don't have a problem with any of those things. But if you don't have the skill set to use them and know how to use it, that stuff is literally costing you money every day that you own it. And another thing, if you're into it and if you're going to do it for a business, don't try to be cheap, because you have to make money to be able to survive. And if people start, when they start in and they kind of do it as a hobby and they get more involved, and that's a mistake that I made, and you start doing it as a hobby, so you have a source of income over here and you're doing the horses, and before you know it, you're going to be losing money. If you need to go down the road and get a bottle of liniment, somebody has to pay for that. Somewhere the money has to come to pay for that. And if you don't have another job and it's all coming from your horse operation, you have to either charge the customer for that's using it, or you have to be charging enough for your services to cover small things like that. And I definitely don't have all the answers to it, but proper bookkeeping, it's huge. And you might think that there's not a lot of bookkeeping involved. I get this horse, I put it in the stall, I feed it, and I take it to the sale. But when you go to the sale with that horse, who's paying for your food and who's paying for your motel? make sure you need to have that all figured in, because you're not doing it for fun anymore. It's your business. When you go to, when you work construction and you don't just go to work today and just for the fun of it, you're gonna get paid for it. And if you have a crew, you're gonna get paid for whatever, somehow you're getting paid for your tools. You need to charge enough to buy the proper tools. Again, I think there's most anybody is happy to give advice, and there's a lot of people out there in this business, and there's a lot of advice available. I'd say just keep your eyes open and stick to the small details. Small details can make you thousands of dollars when you're selling your horse. Neatness, you don't have to have new tack. If your tack fits and it's clean, it looks better than the new tack that doesn't fit. I see a lot of harnesses at sales that aren't clean, and it's a pet peeve that I have. If you want to have a brass harness, you need to polish that brass. If you don't want to polish brass, then don't get a brass harness. Because brass that's not polished doesn't look very good. That's just some of the stuff that when you do braiding, all that stuff, pay attention and look around and see what looks neat, and try to copy on that. You can learn a lot of things that doesn't cost you a dime, but just keeping your eyes open.
Delmar, before we have you weigh in on that, I think that brought up a point that I was thinking about. Is everything you just said is absolutely true, but I think it's really important, and I'm not a horse guy, I really don't know a lot about horses, believe it or not, but one thing is, if you're gonna do things like Richard just said, to look at the people, watch what they're doing, make sure you understand why they're doing what they're doing. If they put, martingale on, why are they doing that? It isn't just to look cool. I always thought it would be a situation where, let's say there's a sale, and Delmar Valley's they've got this $100,000 hitch mare that they're really excited about, and just before she goes in the ring, they accidentally kick over a purple paint can, and it paints their one hoof kind of purple, and the horse goes through and goes for $100,000. I bet you the next sale you'll see about 10 horses going through with a purple hoof. Why are you doing it? I don't know, but Delmar Valley did it. I think it must have worked. Understand why you're doing what you're doing, and it's really going to help you an awful lot.
That's a good point. And any tack, that traditional tack, like a show harness, every piece of tack that's on there is on there for a reason. And if you don't know why and how to use it, ask, because there's people that can tell you. We could go on and on about this, and I don't want to bore you guys, but properly adjusted martingales, and like I said, just a properly adjusted harness, and I'm not talking just about how tight to make the belly band. I'm talking about where that back piece sits in relation to his withers, and it goes on and on. But you take a horse, and I always tell, like, there's a lot of young guys that help me, and my theory is this: if you're always clean and you're neat, and you present that horse that way, people are going to like it. They may not even know why they like it, but they do like it, and they notice it.
That's helpful. Delmar, what do you have to add to that?
I forgot the question.
That's okay, it kind of got complicated there, I'll make it easy for you. Let's talk about somebody who is wanting to get better and learn more. We can even transition, not just from the young people, everybody here. What's the best way to learn all of those, I won't say tricks, because they're not tricks, they're just ways of going that seem to be successful?
I think find somebody that you admire, and somebody that's been successful in the business, and kind of put them as your role model, maybe, so to speak. And I'm not saying put them too high on a pedestal, because everybody makes mistakes and will. But kind of put them, kind of make a role model out of them, and pattern yourself to do as they do. And if you pattern yourself long enough and hard enough after that person, and then I'm not saying don't be yourself. At some point you got to be yourself. But pattern yourself, ask questions, and be open to criticism. But with all that said, at the end of the day, there will still be some horsemen that are better than others. It just is what it is. That connection that some horsemen have, cannot be trained. But I think pattern yourself after somebody do not be afraid to ask questions because they've been there and they've done that and it worked.
That's really helpful. I think to go along with that, not to interject too much here, but don't discount somebody who is not, you'll see people out there that are not good horsemen. That's just the way it is. But just because they don't do a great job in the ring or they don't have their horses looking the nicest, doesn't mean there's not something that they do that you could learn from and could make a positive difference. They may do something really small just in the way, when we set this in here, we put an extra twist on there, and you're like, why did you do that? And they explain, like, that's a really good idea. You're still a really bad horseman, but that is a good idea. So you can always learn from somebody, and sometimes it's learning from their mistakes, but sometimes it's just, just something really small that can work. Now let's talk about something that is not too positive. You guys have been in this business a long time and had a lot of success, but I'm guessing you've had some mistakes along the way. And I don't want you to get, talking about how you got arrested in New York City for stabbing that guy.
That was on my second day.
That was another story.
My second day today.
Exactly. But more just,
Oh, no.
what mistakes have you made that would actually...
From my father-in-law.
Well, he was kind of getting on your nerves. But anyway, what mistakes have you made that other people can learn from so they don't actually make them? And you guys can go whatever order you choose here, that's fine.
I guess as far as mistakes, I've made a lot of them. And probably for me to talk about them and go all day, I don't really know even where to start and where to go with that. I bought a Dutch harness one time.
What were you thinking?
How much time? Where are we at?
We've got about 10 minutes. We're in good shape. I don't want to...
On that Dutch harness thing, I bought this Dutch,
6 minutes, yeah.
and I thought it was real cool. It was a cool thing to do, but at that point, Dad gave me a little money to go buy a horse, and we paid $4,300, and that was big bucks at that time. I was maybe just fresh married, and had this new wife and everything. And I coaxed this English buddy of mine to go on the first ride with me. Maybe second, I forget how well it was. And the old buggy came up, we was going down the hill, and the buggy came up, and she hadn't done like Wilmer Slayball said about desensitizing and all that stuff, because when her back ankles hit the axle, she had been done trained in a round pen because she had it on out. And this was about a 350-pound buddy that I had. Is this okay? Is this round pen?
As long as it prevents them from doing the same thing.
Okay, yeah, don't buy that. Anyway, this 350-pounder, and he's a good guy, and I'm not talking bad about him, but he's a huge guy. He's lost weight since, but she was a kicking. And we were just going about 3 miles an hour, and every time she would kick, he'd go on. And whenever he kicked, the belly would come up because his head went back, and I mean, it was just grazing him every time. And finally, I tried to get off, which is the dumbest thing I ever done, but she wasn't going very fast, and I thought I could kind of shut things off. That was very dumb. But he ended up coming off with me, and he didn't land good, and he crashed in the road, and it was terrible. She went in the ditch and bowed up, and it was not a good situation. I had drug and whatever all night. But the funny part was, he was headed back home and pretty grouchy about the whole situation. And there was a guy come up behind him and didn't know what had happened. And he was going into a little town, kind of about the size of Trenton, not even that big, and don't even have a gas station. He was walking on into town, headed home, let me sit down there. And the guy said, Garrett, what are you doing? He said, run away. And the guy thought he said he was running away. He couldn't figure out why Garrett was running away on foot going into town, but that's kind of how that went. But yeah, we had a lot of runaways, and I could talk all day. One day the bit tore, and my neighbor lady was done tired of it. I broke my bit, and we was going through there, and the neighbor lady came out of the house. And every time she would hit, she'd holler. And she got to screaming pretty good. And kind of woke the whole neighborhood up, and her 12-year-old boy was actually in the portage yard. And it's a true story. And she was making enough lapdog that he figured it's pretty much over. So every time she did, she'd go, Delmar Wagler, that bear's gonna kill somebody. and he come on out. Anyway, but is that a big enough mistake?
Oh, I'm sure you'll make something right, Richard, I'm sure you got a large bank to pull from, so.
I do, and I don't know where to start, but I'd say probably the number one mistake that I made was lack of bookkeeping, and there's a lot of other mistakes that I made, but most of them will channel back to lack of bookkeeping. You have to know where the money's going and what it's going for. And I'm still learning, there's no doubt about it, but when you're gonna run a training operation, bookkeeping is huge, because for one, there's not a huge cash flow to start with, and it's not a get-rich-quick thing. I don't think anybody trains trains horses for the money. So we have a passion for it, and that's why we do it, and it's nice if we can make a living at it, but I would say lack of bookkeeping is probably the biggest mistake that I made, and most of the others will channel right back to that.
Yeah, like Dave said, it's a tough question, because we can think of a lot of little things, or I could along the way, that I could have done different, as far as mistakes, including giving too much for horses, or sometimes when horses are too high buying. But I guess to look at my whole program and what we do is probably jumping for all the new things. Used to be more, every time there was a new feed seminar, mineral seminar, or whatever it was come along, you go there, you buy stuff, and you try it on your colts or your mares, and you're constantly flipping them back and forth and trying to get them used to something new. I learned earlier on that find something that works for me, a program that's good for the horses, and just kind of stick with it. And I feel like that's helped me a lot. That was a mistake I did, that I feel like I did earlier on in my program, that was hard for me, and even financially not the best, and then also on your horses. Outside of that, I don't really know what I can say about mistakes.
Is there any last minute things you guys would want to clear up or make sure that people know as far as what you have to say here?
Oh, I don't know that I really, I guess it's, as we wrap it up, I've been here before, and I love coming down here, and there's a lot of young people here, and I appreciate that you guys all come out. Another thing that I see is Daniel gets a lot of support from his community, and I think that's huge. If you have somebody in your community that does what Daniel does, support it. I'm not saying that you have to send every horse to him or whatever, or breed all your mares to his stallions, but he's here as a service to the community, and he's making a living at it, and it's nice to me to see when people support people like that, because you get strength by supporting each other, and if you're sitting in this community and you don't support anything that he does, and you just go to wherever or over here, and you don't build strength, and by building, unity builds strength, and that's in a lot of different areas in life, but there's no doubt in the horse world that builds strength. And I appreciate everybody that supports Daniel and everybody, and I had a real eye-opener here a couple weeks ago when we had our barn fire. The amount of people that reached out to me, it was mind-boggling. We're all competitors, and we go to the sale, or we go to the show ring, we're all competing with each other, but at the end of the day, like Delmar said, the friendships are what counts, and I just feel really grateful for everybody that reached out. So don't ever underestimate the people out there. They're all there to help each other, and again, I think a lot of strength comes from working together.
Eli, did you have something you wanted to add there? I think you were concerned about something.
There's one thing that I kind of wanted to add. I was wondering if Delmar, we talked here about making a mistake. I wondered if he ever made the same mistake twice. I feel like there's something here that he might want to come clean to with the crowd here. You don't have nothing to say. What are you driving now in your buggy?
No, did you mean the name of the horse? Is that what you're saying, Eli? or-
Willie.
Okay.
Tell these guys about Willie. Tell them where you bought him and how that all went.
Dewey Cheatham how? That's a standard red trotter part, I know.
What's his sire?
That's on the damn side.
What was the sire on that one?
I think it was.
He's not standard.
Well, neither are you.
No, that's what it is. I laughed at the Dutchess, I sputtered at the Dutchess, I'll continue to do it, but I do drive one on my bike. But as far as a little bit of wrap up, I'm kind of the same way. I don't have any fancy words to say or whatever. I appreciate Danny and the bunch putting it on. And I guess for a wrap up, my main thing is see them kids have a connection with the horse. This is not really rehearsed or anything, but I just share a little something that happened. If there's something that really gets me, it's when you see a child that has a connection with the horse. I know that's just what I like and whatever. Some other people like dog connections and whatever, but we had a little windstorm go through our place here a couple of years ago. And it took down about a 30 to 60 building. We had a little miniature pony in there. And he got banged up good. I mean, he lost an eye and his leg was out. I mean, this dude was in bad shape. He couldn't even hardly stand. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And I'm not here to just talk about personal stuff, but it was about 11 o'clock at night. And we was out there in the barn. My little girl was probably about 6 years old. And she was sitting there brushing that pony. You know, she was pretty bad shape on him. And I said, well, Hannah, I guess I'm gonna go in. I said, it's pretty late. She said, well, if you don't care, I'm gonna brush him a little while and I'll come later. And, you know, and it was a long way to the house, but her pony was hurting and she wanted to take care of it. And that and the friendships is what it's all about.
Absolutely. I want to thank all of you guys. Eli, did you have anything you want to add? I know you were kind of not even asked to be on this panel. You were forced to be on this panel.
Yeah, Daniel Glick, I showed up here this morning and I was at my vet's office yesterday and the vet said, so you're speaking tomorrow? I said, no, I'm not speaking tomorrow. So I showed up this morning and sure enough, my name was in ink down here. And I used to kind of like Danny, but I started to change my mind. A month or two ago, I showed up down here for church one Sunday and he treated me about the same.
You had me preaching or what was it?
I guess he gave the longest time that's ever been Jack. I guess I got to get a little antsy for you got that.
I cannot thank you guys enough. I knew it was going to be a really good roundtable because I know the knowledge that you guys have. But your willingness to share with everybody and be really honest and open is so important. And don't forget, we're going to wrap it up here, but before we say thanks to them, don't forget that they're very accessible people. If you have questions you want to ask them, they're going to be around, and that's why we're here. That's the real value of this event, is that we all get to be together and share our knowledge. So if you don't mind, I just want to say thanks personally to all you three of you to make my job so much easier, and I just can't thank you enough. Thanks everybody for letting everybody.